you don't have to be a particle physicist to understand that everything in reality that's fundamental can be converted into everything else. So what's fundamental? Well, you've heard all the words. Electrons are fundamental, quarks are fundamental, photons are fundamental. There's a few other ones, like neutrinos, that are fundamental. And then we have gravity. That's fundamental, and just conceptually we imagine gravity as represented in a pixelated manner by an idea called a graviton, which is just a way to think about the quantizing of it. Well, all these fundamental things, if we were to write them out on the floor, you would see, gosh, so all of the complexity of reality is only made of a few things. And what can we say about these few things? So to me, the most fascinating thing that we can say about them is they are all convertible into all the others. It's called a gauge symmetry transformation. It's kind of like, in fact, it's not kind of like, it's mathematically exactly like this. My hand is not going to change because I'm making it rigid. But this shadow on the wall here is not my hand. Mathematically and in every other way, it's a different object than my hand. But it's deeply related to my hand. My hand lives in 3D, and this shadow on the wall lives in 2D. And there's another shadow, this one. Okay? This one is also deeply related to my hand. And because both of the two shadows are related to my hand, they can be converted into one another by a simple rotation, a specific rotation. And so these particles and forces, like photons and electrons, they get converted into one another by particle physicists mathematically with something called a gauge symmetry transformation, which honestly is not that much different than the rotation that you translate to get this shadow into this shadow. So you can call my hand the invariant object because it doesn't change. And you can call the shadows the variant objects. So everything that we know of in reality, which is this small list of a few things, which includes gravity, are variant shadows. They get transformed into the others. If you realize that, it should make you sort of think, well, holy crap, what is the invariant thing? Right? Because we're told that those are fundamental particles, but they're fundamental for a reason, not because they can't be converted into another one. They're fundamental because we believe that you can't break them apart and get another particle that builds them. But they're not fundamental in terms of being the invariant thing. So this is not my theory or my idea. This has been known since the 1970s that the E8 polytope is the only invariant object that unifies everything that we have in our reality. That is, the fundamental things. Because we can know how the mating behavior of dogs and notions of complex societal behaviors all come from these ultra-simple things. But the ultra-simple things are all mapped to the vertexes of this E8 polytope. To me, that's the most exciting fact that the general public doesn't know, but which is not disagreed on among scientists. It has been known since the 1970s. The original string theory in the 1970s used 2 copies of E8 because it's the only object that unifies all the fundamental particles and forces, including gravity. So the pigeons are just meant to say that if all those pigeons are the same pigeon, there's several different shadows, and the shadows are the invariant particles, of the variance particles, and the bird, or the one bird, is the invariant E8 polytope. Okay. And it is known that when an organism has no limit on its resources, that it will continue doubling. For example, a few million bacteria on the surface of this apple are not very influential to the apple's destiny. There are too few of them, just a couple million, because the real things that are influencing the apple's destiny are, you know, the intermolecular forces and gravity and a whole lot of other things, the tensile strength, you know, or the bacteria are nothing. They're inconsequential. But after just a few rounds of doubling, the bacteria actually switch roles to become the overwhelming defining force that determines the very destiny of the apple, returning all of its elements back to the biosphere. It becomes stronger than the intermolecular forces or gravity. So I can hit the ×2 button on my calculator 80 times in 30 seconds. I thought about that. How fast could I do 80 80 times, doubling, double, 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 double. I can do it in 30 seconds. And if we doubled a penny only 80 times, we would have more pennies than all the atoms in all of the galaxies of the entire universe, times billions, times billions. Doesn't seem right, does it? And that's because there's nothing in your world that's trained in the hardwiring of your mind to think of doubling algorithms. Doubling is a freaky thing. And there's nothing that you see that ever really does that. It happens with bacteria at a very small scale, but what happens is they rapidly, after only a few doubling cycles, they use up their resources, and then they stop doubling. So it's very rare that we get to see a doubling algorithm come remotely close to the 80 times. And in our macro scale, things accelerate in linear ways. Cars accelerate linear. The lions on the African savanna would accelerate and chase us in linear ways. Things get faster, but linear. Doubling is a weird thing. So, if human consciousness could escape the limitations of Earth and just keep doubling, right? We can't do that here. We can't keep doubling. But if we could escape the limitations of Earth, we would be able to double within a shockingly small number of doublings. There would be more conscious entities in the universe than all of the planets times some huge number with dozens of zeros. So we started leaving the planet in 1968, and right now we're just bursting with desire. I'm a major shareholder in a company here called Moon Express at Moffett Field, and we're now part of the new generation of private companies that are now leaving the planet to do things. It's not in the hands of government anymore. It went too slow. This is going to happen. Most everything that you see in science fiction movies happens. Remember the flip phone from the old Gene Roddenberry Star Trek? Remember when those flip phones first came out? It's like, oh my God, Gene Roddenberry, he's a futurist, a genius. He predicted the flip phone, and I have one in my pocket. And now, if you have a flip phone, it's like you're a loser. You're like so past. That's like 12 years ago, right? We have these now.
They have tricorders now when they check out your temperature.
Yes.
They do a tricorder team.
Yes.
Just at the
Another company that I'm involved with that's at Moffett Field also is called Xanadu, and we're producing a tricorder, and we're competing to make the tricorder. So, but anyway, so I'm going to keep pushing because I'm not too far from the end. So we're bursting with desire to do this, which we've all seen in the science fiction drawings. Is there anything in physics or anything with the relentless exponential doubling of technology? I mean, I have the ENIAC computer was millions of times weaker than this, and it weighed tons. So this is going to happen. We are leaving the planet. We're as good as gone. We'll still stay here, but we will speciate, and we will go out, and we will not be us anymore, because we will speciate, and we will double, and the numbers will not be limited by resources. And so that 80 times on my calculator, the ×2 button, it will happen, and in some finite, really small amount of time, not astrophysical lengths of time, there will be consciousness spreading out throughout the universe. Right now, exponential doubling of technology is actually manifesting our ability to leave the planet in extraordinary ways. I mean, most of us here are old enough to get a feel for the accelerating nature of this weird doubling process, where computer processing is doubling. We're about to come into the era of quantum computation. Weird stuff is about to happen in your lifetime, like Star Trek technology. Not in Gene Roddenberry was wrong. Star Trek is set in like the year 2300, right? That's not going to be the case. We're going to have technologies like that and beyond, probably in our lifetimes. So imagine if high consciousness beings were able to group their consciousness, like parallel cluster computing, right? Right? Like me and Jeff, we go into the Vulcan mind meld together, and we collaborate our consciousness through some psychic technology, or some physical non-psychic technology, neurobiological technology, and somehow the collective combination of our minds is different, enhanced beyond what individuals, and then we go back to being separate. So imagine if we could do that in large numbers. no matter how far we're separated. But what if some new physics that allowed for instant non-local information exchange came on the scene, like a new theory of everything, that allowed us to do real-time, instant-time neural networking? By the way, this is the universe. This is a scientific depiction of the tentacles of energy that connect in filaments between galaxies. This is such large scale. Each one of these nodes are galaxies, and this is a brain cell. So the universe has the topology of a neural network. So that sort of neural network is generally called what I just described. If humans go out and we're like all over the universe, and then we develop some new technology that allows us to connect instantly, then what we are technically is called a neural network. That's just any network of things, objects, which have high connectivity between them and exchange information and also create new information as products of the exchange combinations. Simple. Many things are neural networks. So the universe as a whole is an exchange network because everything is connected by gravity and electromagnetism. Nothing whatsoever is isolated. And popular astrophysical models of the early universe say that shortly after the Big Bang, the universe was a hot soup of particles called a Bose Einstein condensate. Now, this is actually the most popular view, that there was a phase which was a Bose Einstein condensate. And so when two or more particles are in a Bose Einstein condensate, you can then, after that, separate them, and they can remain quantum entangled. So this was a prediction of quantum mechanics decades ago, and only very recently did we have the technology to experimentally confirm it, and it was gloriously confirmed. It's just weird. It's like basically, it means like if you have one particle that used to be in a Bose Einstein condensate, and then the other particles that it was with, if you have two of them, let's say, and you separate them, like one on Alpha Centauri, 4 light years away, or one in another, literally another time, right, another region of space-time, and then you flip this particle, it will instantly flip the particle. Not at the speed of light, not faster than the speed of light, at no speed. It's like if I have a quarter, and I'm looking at the head side, and I grab the little head, and I turn it, or I just turn it. You don't really ask, well, how long did it take for that side to communicate the message to the other side that it was turning? It's sort of like a false question. You say, well, no, you're turning the whole thing, right? Similarly, these particles, even though there's this notion of separation, they are one. They are quantum entangled. So so the particles can be separated, like I said, by light years, and they're connected. Quantum entanglement. So all the particles are likely now to be quantum entangled. The early universe was much smaller. There was this one phase where the mathematics shows us, astrophysicists that is, that they were all in a Bose Einstein condensate, and then they keep going out and they get separated in space and time, and they go on to form humans and form planets and far-flung galaxies, and they remain entangled in an instantaneous, zero-time neural network. So those are just two logical ways. If you've caught what I've said, I'm trying to say how emergent collective universal consciousness can exist. I am not saying it is like our consciousness. It is not like the old man with the beard. I am saying that the whole universe, if it has the topology of a neural network in instant time, because everything was a Bose Einstein condensate, there is one plausible, could be wrong, but it's a plausible logical framework to say, well, once you have the topology for a neural network, can emergent pathways of complexity emerge? Because that's what happens in a brain and other neural networks. We actually make artificial neural networks now. So perhaps, right? We can just say, maybe, right? And and then the other conjecture is, well, wait a minute, if humans do have the ability to double, and if some new physics allows us to sort of teleport to other areas of the universe, then how are we going to populate the universe? In other words, if we don't discover new physics that allows us to go non-locally to another location, then the way that we're going to populate the universe at the very maximum is at the speed of light, ballistically, like a ballistic trajectory going out from Earth in all directions, our descendants, out. But the problem is the universe itself is expanding at the speed of light, And so we would never be able to permeate the entire universe with our consciousness and in our descendants' consciousness. But what if we could go out and simply choose coordinates, and through some new physics go to these coordinates, right? Teleport to these different coordinates, right? Be some physics or technology that doesn't exist. Well, then you're going to have no limitation of resources. So then humans are going to do the doubling 80 times, and you're going to get to just unfathomable numbers of conscious beings that actually more spread out to every location in the universe sparsely, like a sponge. A sponge is mostly empty space, but it has the topology of sort of being on average that low density everywhere. So if that technology emerges, we and our descendants will go out and we'll populate the entire universe, and it'll be really sparse. They'll be separated by great regions where there's no consciousness. And then because of the doubling algorithm, which is, again, freaky math, it just is what it is, we will rapidly, in non-astrological time frames, in human society time frames, we will fill in the density of the sponge, as though you visualize a sponge of consciousness distribution in the universe, then densifying with exponential doubling until it's completely filled in. And that's why I showed you the analogy of the bacteria on the apple. At some point, the materialists would laugh and say, it's just humans, like the Romulans and the humans in Star Trek, and they're all over the universe, and they're teleporting about, but they're still not a force to be reckoned with. They're not like gravity. They're not like some real force of nature. But what happens is at some scale, like the bacteria, they become the dominant force that defines the destiny of the physical system of the universe.